At Thanksgiving dinner, my father didn't lower his voice or soften his words. No, he stared me straight in the eye in front of everyone and said I was a useless failure. He pointed to the door, and without a second thought, told me to go live in the streets. There was no hesitation, no whispering. Just cold, brutal words, like a slap that left no mark but bruised deeper than anything physical could. And as if that wasn't enough, my mother didn't even blink. She was just blank. Crystal, well, she hid her smile behind her napkin, like it was some sort of joke to her. And me? I was sitting there, feeling like I was miles away from anyone who ever claimed to love me. The world around me felt hollow, like it could collapse at any moment. I didn't fight. I didn't cry. I just stood up, smoothed down my coat, walked out, quiet, steady, and yet the weight of their judgment followed me like a shadow I had finally stopped pretending wasn't there. What they didn't know was that I was making $25 million a year. But none of that mattered to them. They didn't care about my success. They only saw what they wanted to see, and that was someone who'd never measure up to their ridiculous standards. And when the cold air hit my face, something inside me shifted. Something broke, but it wasn't like how they wanted it to be. It was the beginning of something I hadn't even realized was possible. 3 weeks later, everything they thought they controlled came crashing down. But before I tell you what happened next, tell me, where are you listening from? I want to know how far my story has traveled. I'm not the only one who's been through this, right? My name is Flo Hartman. And if you looked at my family from the outside, you'd swear we were perfect. Picture perfect, in fact. You know the type, those holiday cards with matching sweaters, smiles that look rehearsed, and a dining room staged like it was ripped out of some magazine. Perfection was our family's best disguise. And my parents, they wore it like a badge of honor. But behind that perfect image, the truth was darker than anyone could see. Growing up, I quickly learned where I belonged, and where I didn't. Crystal, my younger sister, was the golden child. The one who got all the praise. She was the star. While I was just the background. My name was barely a footnote in their world. Crystal got the violin lessons, the summer programs, and the private tutors. And me? I got the chores. I got the reminders about how lucky I was that Crystal was such a good example. I didn't fit their mold. I wasn't the one they wanted. While Crystal posed for pictures, I stayed up late teaching myself how to build websites, automate systems, and fix things people didn't even realize were broken. I was a creator, and that wasn't something they understood. At 16, while other girls posted prom pictures, I posted my first online project. And what did my family say? It's just a phase. They never asked what I was doing. They only cared about what other people thought. When I left college to build something real, they told me I was embarrassing them. Never once did they ask what I was actually creating. It was always about the image. By the time I turned 32, Crystal had become everything they wanted. Polished, charming, loud enough to fill a room. And me? I was everything they dismissed. Quiet, independent, unwilling to shrink myself to fit their expectations. The quieter I became, the louder they rewrote my story. They told everyone I wasn't building companies, I was messing around online. They told me I wasn't successful, I was struggling. Thanksgiving wasn't new, no. It was just the first time they said the quiet part out loud. The humiliation, the whispers, the way they seated me at the end of the table like I was some distant relative. It had always been there, under the surface. But that night something cracked inside me. Not because they insulted me, I'd survived worse, but because of how easily they believed their version of me over the truth. Back in Seattle, my penthouse felt like a different world. The floor-to-ceiling windows, the calm, the life I had built with my own 2 hands. But still, their voices echoed in my mind, scraping at old wounds I thought I had sealed. I kept asking myself one question. How can people who know so little about your life feel so confident defining it? But at that moment, I didn't realize it yet. The worst was yet to come. Their cruelty at that dinner? It was just the beginning. Tell me, have you ever been told something that made you feel like your whole world was upside down? Leave a comment and let's talk. I'd love to hear your stories, how you pushed through those moments. Now let's dive back in. 3 weeks passed, and the days after Thanksgiving felt strangely hollow, like someone had turned down the volume on the world around me. I went through meetings, strategy calls, everything I usually handled with sharp focus. But my mind kept drifting back to that dinner. The way my dad's voice had echoed, the way my mother hadn't flinched. And Crystal, the way she watched me like she was witnessing something she'd been waiting her whole life to see. But humiliation doesn't end in the moment it's delivered. No, it has an aftershock. And 3 days later mine came. I was standing in my kitchen, waiting for the kettle to boil when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Lily, my cousin, the only one who had ever treated me like more than just a shadow in that family. Flo, I need to tell you something. Your mom's been talking. My stomach tightened. I braced myself. Talking how? She continued. She told everyone at church you're basically homeless in Seattle, that your internet hobbies finally fell apart, and you're staying on couches. I just stared at the screen. Homeless. Couch surfing. Failed at life. They didn't just throw me out. They rewrote my story. And they did it with such confidence, like they believed every word they said. I texted Lily back. I have a 3-bedroom penthouse. She replied. I know. They don't want to know. That line. It cut deeper than the lie itself. They didn't want to know the truth. Because if they did, they'd have to face the reality that everything they mocked, minimized, and dismissed had turned into a success they couldn't control. And that was just the beginning. 2 days later, the aftershock hit me full force. I had just finished my morning routine, scrolling through emails in my kitchen, when something caught my eye. It was an email from a law office in Portland. The subject line read, "Confirmation required for your guarantor status." My breath hitched. Guarantor? I opened the message and in that instant I forgot how to breathe. It was referencing a loan for a renovation, around $400,000, taken out 2 years ago. And according to the attached documents, I was listed as the guarantor. My mind raced. This doesn't make sense. I never signed anything for them. But the file included a scan of my signature. A signature I hadn't given. I stared at it, the world suddenly freezing around me. My body went cold. The truth settled like ice in my veins. They had forged my signature. A massive loan, tied to a renovation project for Crystal's boutique. The same boutique she bragged about like it was her destiny. It all clicked. The humiliation at Thanksgiving wasn't just random cruelty. It was strategic. They needed me small, powerless, and easily dismissed. But more than that, they needed me to stay in the shadows so if that loan ever collapsed, they could blame me. I stood in my kitchen, the city lights flickering against the glass, as the weight of it all hit me. Not only had they thrown me out, but they had stolen from me. They forged my name, used my identity to protect themselves from a mess they created. And the worst part? They truly believed they had the right to do it. I didn't feel anger. Not yet. I felt clarity. Cold, steady clarity that washed over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to understand them. I wasn't trying to make excuses for them. I wasn't even trying to win them over anymore. I was done. But being done didn't mean walking away. No, it meant drawing a line. A line they could never cross again. I know this is heavy, but it's so important to stand your ground when people try to control or manipulate your life. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to reclaim your power? Share your thoughts with me. I'd love to hear how you took your life back into your own hands. Now back to the story. I spent the next morning combing through every single document the law firm had sent. Bills, payments, records tied to the renovation of Crystal's boutique. Every trail led to the same place. Large sums of money had been moved around with zero transparency, and the loan that was supposed to be protected by my name was slipping toward default. If that loan defaulted, the lender could seize the property, force a sell-off, or push for recovery. And if my name stayed on that paperwork, I would be dragged right down with it. I forwarded everything to my attorney in Seattle. He called within minutes. Flo, this isn't sloppy. This is deliberate. I already knew. But hearing him say it out loud sent a shiver down my spine. I asked him, "Are you sure you're ready to pursue this? Because once we open that door, there's no going back." "That's the point," I replied, the decision already made. I was no longer interested in playing their game. We began immediately, verifying the inconsistencies in the handwriting, tracing the flow of money, documenting the misrepresentation in the financials. And the more we dug, the clearer it became. My family had been building their upgrades, their perfect life on borrowed money. Not earned, not saved, borrowed. and my name had been their safety net, their shield. But that realization didn't hurt me. What hurt was how naturally they must have believed I would never fight back, that I would never stand up for myself. They had always treated me like a footnote. Now I was about to prove them wrong in the most unassuming way. Have you ever been underestimated, like people thought you couldn't or wouldn't stand up for yourself? Let me know in the comments. It's a powerful feeling when you finally reclaim your power. As we dug deeper into the financial mess, my attorney called again, a couple of days later. The loan is sliding toward default. If it continues this way, the lender might consider transferring control of the loan to a qualified buyer who can absorb the debt. And just like that, I knew. I'm qualified, I said, my voice steady. I'm more than qualified. If the loan defaulted, I had the leverage. I could take control of the property, the boutique, the whole situation. It wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting myself. About making sure that if they pulled me into their mess, I would be the one controlling how it all unraveled. 2 weeks later, my team and I worked quietly, positioning ourselves for the possibility that the loan might default. We prepared to legally acquire the loan if it did. I wasn't doing this to hurt them. I was doing this because it was time for me to protect what I had worked so hard for. And still, not a single person from my family reached out. No apologies. No explanations. Not even a lie to try and cover up the truth. It was almost poetic how silent they were, while I quietly laid the foundation to change everything for them. 3 weeks after that Thanksgiving dinner, I got the call from my attorney. The loan was entering default. You're first in line, he said. I closed my laptop slowly. I wasn't feeling victorious. I wasn't dancing in the streets. I felt steady, like I was standing on solid ground for the first time in my life. They told me to go live in the streets. Now I was about to own the very ground they stood on. The moment when you realize you have control over your own story. It's everything. How does that feel for you? Are you ready to take back the reins of your life? I want to hear your thoughts. Keep reading because this is just the beginning of what happens next. It was only a few days after my attorney's call that everything came into focus. That cold clarity I'd felt before settled deeper into my chest, like a steady heartbeat that I couldn't ignore anymore. The power was mine now. The control was mine. They had pushed me out, humiliated me, tried to rewrite my story. But the truth was, they never had the power to do that. I prepared myself for what was next, not with excitement, but with quiet determination. I knew what was coming. They had no idea. Not yet. They were still living in a world where they could manipulate everything, but that world was about to crumble. They hadn't even begun to realize what they'd set in motion. I spent the next 4 days preparing the legal documents. Every detail was meticulously outlined, every condition, every consequence. I wasn't doing this to destroy them. No, I wasn't like that. But I was doing it to protect myself, my life, my work, my reputation. I'd learned over the years that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is take a step back and let people see you for who you really are, without a mask. And I wasn't the girl they thought I was. I wasn't the failure they had painted me to be. I was done pretending I was anything less than what I had built. Sometimes it's not about revenge. It's about reclaiming your life, your peace. Ever had a moment where you just stood back and watched people realize they underestimated you? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your experience with standing your ground. 2 days before the deadline, I was sitting in my office, finalizing everything when the phone rang. It was Mason, my brother-in-law. His voice was low, urgent, and full of tension. You need to know, Flo. Crystal's panicking. Your parents think the lender is coming after them. They don't know it's you. I felt a strange sense of detachment wash over me. Of course they're panicking. They have no idea what's coming. They think they're still in control. I didn't let my emotions show, though. I knew this was going to be the breaking point for them. They thought they could get away with everything. But now they had no way out. Mason continued. I don't think they'll handle it well when they find out. Let them panic, I said, the words coming out as cold as I'd ever felt. I want them to feel the weight of what they did. I knew this was the moment I had to stay calm, to stay in control. They had tried to strip me of everything, but now the tables were turning. Now I was the one who held the cards. And then I made the call. Friday night. Bellevue House. I'll meet them there. Mason was silent for a moment. Then he said, They think it's a negotiation with the lender. Let them believe that. I hung up, not feeling any triumph. No, I wasn't interested in rubbing it in their faces. I wanted them to feel the weight of their actions, the consequences of their choices. And when they walked into that room, they were going to understand exactly what I had been dealing with. So, when you're finally in control of a situation you thought you'd never be in, how do you handle it? Do you seek closure? Or do you simply move forward? Let me know your thoughts. It's always powerful to see people reclaiming their peace. The night of the meeting, I arrived early at Bellevue House. It was a cold, quiet evening in Seattle, the mist hanging in the air like a blanket. I walked through the restaurant's private room, my attorney at my side, the space set with understated elegance. Nothing flashy, nothing aggressive, just a stage for the truth. As the door opened, I saw them. My mother walked in first, flawless as ever, her expression tight like she was holding something back. My father followed, his jaw set in that same hard line he always wore when things weren't going his way. And then came Crystal, her eyes red-rimmed but defiant, like she wasn't about to let anyone see the cracks in her armor. They didn't greet me. I didn't expect them to. My mother, ever the one to try and keep up appearances, was the first to speak. Her voice was carefully measured like she was about to deliver some kind of apology, or so she thought. "Flo," she said, taking her seat. "We appreciate you arranging this meeting with the lender. We're confident this is all a misunderstanding." My attorney exchanged a look with me, then leaned forward. "Mrs. Hartman," he said, settling his documents on the table, "there is no misunderstanding. I'm not the lender's attorney. I represent Miss Hartman." My father frowned, his confusion palpable. "Then why are you here?" "Because," my attorney continued, sliding the first folder forward, "Miss Hartman is the acquiring party. She now controls the debt." Silence. The kind of silence that fills a room so deeply you can hear your own heartbeat. Crystal's breath hitched first, her eyes darting from the papers to me. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, a gasp escaping her lips. My father's face drained of color. He couldn't understand it. How could this be happening? I watched them calm, steady. I didn't feel satisfaction. I wasn't relishing their shock. I was simply watching the truth land. It wasn't my truth anymore. It was theirs. And they were finally going to see what they had done. My father, recovering a little of his composure, pointed at the papers accusingly. You bought our loan. Why would you do that?" "Because," I said softly, "you put my name on it." My mother shook her head quickly. "We thought you'd understand. Crystal needed help. Your father meant well. Forging my signature isn't meaning well." I cut in, my voice steady. "Calling me a failure at Thanksgiving isn't help. Telling people I'm homeless isn't concern." And then Crystal snapped. The mask she'd been holding up for so long finally cracked. "Why couldn't you just let it go?" she yelled. "You have money. You don't need this." I looked at her the way I would look at a stranger, someone who wandered into the wrong story. "You're right," I said, calm as ever. "I don't need this. What I need is my name not tied to a sinking loan you all pretended didn't exist." The words hung in the air. No one spoke. The weight of everything they had done to me, to us, was finally sitting in that room. My attorney slid the next document across the table, cutting through the tension. "These are the terms," he said. "You can sell the property and fully resolve the debt. Or if you choose not to sell, Ms. Hartman will assume ownership, and you will remain as tenants under a structured rental contract." My father whispered, his voice barely audible. "We have to rent our own home?" "No," I corrected him. "It's not your home anymore. That moment when you finally stand up for yourself. It's huge. Tell me in the comments. How did you feel the first time you stood your ground in a situation like this? Let's talk about reclaiming control." Crystal glared at me, her eyes full of disbelief and fury. "You're ruining everything." "No," I replied, my voice calm, unwavering. "I'm ending what you started." And then my mother did what I expected. She broke. Her face crumpled and she began to sob. Not out of guilt but out of fear. Fear of losing everything she had so carefully crafted. "We're your family," she choked out. "How can you do this to us?" I leaned forward, voice steady, the words falling like a quiet verdict. "You taught me exactly how. The night you threw me out, you said I should go live in the streets. You said I was useless. You said I had nothing. But the truth is, you never knew me at all. I paused for a moment, letting it sit before continuing. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to separate myself from choices that were never mine. My father exhaled, his anger melting into something raw and unexpected. What do you want from us? Nothing, I replied. Not an apology. Not a confession. Just accountability. My attorney added, you have 7 days to decide. The meeting ended in silence. No apologies. No confrontations. Just stunned silence. They left the room looking smaller than I'd ever seen them. Crystal lingered at the doorway, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. You could have helped me, she whispered. I did, I said quietly. Just not the way you wanted. As the door clicked shut behind them, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Not from anger. From release. And outside, the mist had turned to rain. I walked through it without rushing, feeling the weight of my family's expectations finally slip off my shoulders. 3 weeks ago, they told me to go live in the streets. Tonight, they walked out of a building they no longer owned. And for the first time in my life, the distance between us felt like freedom. That feeling of walking away and letting go. It's like a weight lifting off your shoulders. If you've had a moment like this, where you finally separated yourself from toxic expectations, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment and share your journey. Next, stay tuned. The story isn't over yet. The silence after that meeting was louder than any outburst could have been. For days, not a word came from Portland. No calls, no apologies, no change of heart. Not even a single attempt to explain themselves. It was almost as if they were hoping it would all go away if they ignored it long enough. But there was no escaping the consequences of their actions. Not anymore. I kept moving forward, focusing on my work, my life in Seattle. Every day I found myself thinking less and less about them, which felt like a strange kind of victory. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't measuring my success by their standards. I was finally living for myself. But that didn't mean they were done. I knew they'd never let go of the control they thought they had over me. So I stayed vigilant. I was ready for whatever came next. On the 7th day after the meeting, I got the call I'd been expecting, but not the one I'd been hoping for. My attorney's name flashed on my screen. I took a breath before answering. Flo, he said, his voice steady but carrying a sense of finality. The deadline is here. Your family has made their decision. A lump rose in my throat, though I knew what the answer would be. They were backed into a corner. They had no other choice but to sell. They chose to sell, he continued, his words dropping like stones into still water. It clears the debt, and your name is officially removed from everything. I closed my eyes for a moment. The weight of it all hadn't hit me until now. They had made their choice. The one that would keep them from facing any true consequence, but it also meant that they couldn't drag me down with them anymore. They had no power left over me. Good, I said quietly. Make sure the terms are finalized. I want everything wrapped up cleanly. Have you ever had to make a tough decision for your future? Even if it meant letting go of something or someone from your past? I'd love to hear your stories. Share your thoughts in the comments. I think we all know how hard it is to walk away from people who've shaped our lives, even when they've hurt us. The sale was completed within days, and with it came the end of an era. The house in Portland gone. The boutique Crystal had worked so hard to keep afloat gone. They were left with a smaller house, nowhere near the life they had dreamed of. But they would survive. They'd have to. As for me, I felt no triumph, no rush of power. It wasn't about winning. It was about peace. I had finally removed myself from a situation that had been suffocating me for years. And then a strange thing happened. Crystal's boutique folded. It didn't survive the transition. Without the borrowed money and the constant support from my name, it was over within a month. She posted a vague message online about new beginnings, never once mentioning the truth. My parents too retreated. They stepped back from the social circles they once dominated. Their carefully curated image faded, replaced by something much humbler. They were still pretending to live the life they had once shown to the world. But now it was no longer their reality. I felt no satisfaction watching it all unravel. I didn't need to see them suffer. I had my own life now. A life where I wasn't living in the shadow of their expectations, their judgments, or their lies. And that was enough. When you stop waiting for someone else's approval and start living for yourself, everything changes. Have you ever had to step away from people who were holding you back? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment and let's talk about the freedom that comes with standing in your own truth. I went back to my work, my life in Seattle. The one I had built without their validation. It was mine and no one could take that from me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to hide it, to downplay it. I wasn't ashamed of my success anymore. I wasn't trying to make them understand it. Simply was. And that was the best feeling in the world. Sometimes we wait for validation from the people we love. But when you stop needing it, everything changes. Do you think it's possible to ever stop needing validation from others? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. But even with all the changes, there was one more piece of the puzzle to settle. I hadn't heard from them directly in weeks. No phone calls. No texts. It was like they had erased me from their lives. But I wasn't done. One day, just as I was finishing up some work, I got a message. It wasn't from my parents. It wasn't from Crystal. It was from Mason. "Flo," he wrote. "They've reached a breaking point. Your mom called me this morning. She's asking for your help." My heart sank. I stared at the screen, the weight of the message settling over me like a thick fog. Help? After everything they'd done? After all the lies, the manipulation, the humiliation? I couldn't even begin to imagine what they were asking for. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I just felt nothing. I put the phone down and stood up, looking out the window of my penthouse. Seattle was spread out before me, the skyline lit up against the deepening dusk. For the first time, it felt like I was truly free. No more family drama. No more manipulation. No more pretending. And that was enough for me. Have you ever had someone who hurt you come back asking for your help? What would you do in that situation? Share your thoughts with me in the comments. Let's talk about how you'd handle a request like that. For now, though, I knew that the distance between me and my family was the healthiest thing I could do for myself. I had already let go of their expectations. And now I was letting go of their hold on me completely. The silence was finally healing. And for the first time in my life, I felt whole. There's more to this story. But for now, thank you for walking this journey with me. The days after Mason's message felt like a strange kind of limbo. The silence that had hung between me and my family was finally becoming something peaceful, like the kind of quiet that follows a storm. There was no more tension, no more anxiety about what was coming next. The weight of their expectations had been lifted, and I felt lighter than I had in years. But even with that peace, there was a lingering question. Would they ever truly understand? Could they ever realize the damage they'd done? Or would they simply continue to live in the world they had created for themselves, pretending nothing had happened? The truth was, I didn't know if I cared anymore. I had spent so much of my life trying to earn their approval, trying to fit into their perfect, polished image. But now I had a life that was all my own. A life that didn't need their validation, didn't need their approval. And for the first time, I was starting to believe I deserved that freedom. But still, the question lingered. Would they come back? Would they ever reach out again after everything that had happened? I knew I couldn't control it. And honestly, I was starting to realize that I didn't want to. I didn't need them to validate my success, my choices, or my life anymore. I was done with their approval. But that didn't stop the phone from buzzing one evening. It was a text from Mason. Again. "Flo," it read. "They want to meet. Your mom and dad, they want to apologize." I stood still, staring at the screen. The words didn't seem real. They want to apologize? After everything they had put me through, after the years of dismissing my success, belittling my choices, and trying to control me, now they wanted to apologize? I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. The idea of seeing them again, after everything that had happened, stirred something in me. A mix of emotions, anger, frustration, confusion, and yes, even a little bit of curiosity. But what did I really want from them? Apologies? A confession? A change of heart? I didn't know. What I did know was that I had worked so hard to get here, to build a life for myself that wasn't defined by them, that the idea of letting them back in was complicated, to say the least. Eventually I texted back. "When?" He replied, "Tomorrow. Dinner at Bellevue House." I'll be there too, but I think they really want to talk to you. I stared at the message for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keys. I didn't know what I wanted from this meeting. I didn't know if I was ready to open that door again. But I also knew one thing. I had to make sure it was on my terms. I thought about it all night. About the way they had treated me. About the way they had humiliated me. About how they had never once acknowledged what I'd built on my own. They had never really seen me. Not for who I was. Not for what I was capable of. But I was different now. I was no longer the little girl who had been desperate for their love and approval. I had built my own life, and no matter what happened at dinner, I was not going to lose that. The next evening, I arrived at Bellevue House early. I didn't want to be caught off guard. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I wasn't going to walk into that meeting unprepared. I sat in the private room, the same place where they had once tried to control me, tried to manipulate me into submission. The room was set with soft lighting, a quiet elegance that almost felt like a reminder of the last time I had been here. When they walked in, they didn't greet me. They never did. My mother entered first, the perfect image of composure, but her eyes were different. There was a heaviness in them, something that wasn't there before. My father followed, the same tense jawline I had come to expect from him in moments like these. And Crystal, trailing behind them, her face pale but determined. They sat down without a word, the silence hanging thick between us. And then my mother spoke, but her voice was softer than I had ever heard it. Flo, we've been wrong. All of us. I'm sorry. Your father. He's sorry too. She paused, like the words were difficult to form. We were wrong to push you away. Wrong to make you feel like you didn't belong. I didn't say anything at first. I wasn't sure how to respond. My heart was heavy, but not with anger. It was more like a mixture of relief and disbelief. All these years I had wanted them to see me, and now they were finally admitting it. But it didn't feel like enough. I couldn't just forgive them because they said the words. They had a long way to go before they could truly understand the damage they had done. I don't know if I can just forgive everything, I finally said, my voice steady. I've spent my whole life trying to earn your approval. I built a life for myself without your support, and I'm proud of that. But you never really saw me for who I was. You saw what you wanted me to be. My father spoke then, his voice quieter than usual. I see that now, Flo. We were so focused on what we thought you should be, that we missed who you actually were. We're sorry. I really looked at them for the first time in years. They were no longer the towering figures I had once feared. They were just people. Flawed, yes, but people nonetheless. And while I wasn't sure I could ever trust them the way I used to, I also realized something. I didn't need to. I appreciate the apology, I said, taking a breath. But I've learned that my worth isn't tied to your approval. I don't need to prove myself to you anymore. I've built my life. And it's mine. Crystal spoke up then, her voice small. We were so wrong about you, Flo. She paused, tears welling up in her eyes. I thought you were a failure for not following the path we expected. But now I see what you've created. And I'm proud of you. That hit me harder than I expected. For years, I had carried that weight of being seen as the outsider, the failure. But hearing her say that, even with the weight of everything between us, felt like a moment of release. Maybe she hadn't fully understood before, but now she was starting to. We sat there in silence for a long moment, each of us reflecting on the past, on the years of tension and hurt. I wasn't sure what would happen next. But I did know one thing. I had finally found peace. Sometimes, peace doesn't come in the form of a perfect resolution, but in the quiet understanding that we've done our best. Have you found peace in your own life despite unresolved issues? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear how you've made peace with your past. For the first time in my life, I could walk away from my family's expectations and be completely at peace with who I was. It was the most freeing feeling I had ever known. And that, in the end, was all I really needed. So as I sat there listening to them, I realized something even more important. I didn't need them to complete me. I was already whole. And with that realization, I stood up. The dinner was over. I didn't need anything else from them. And I was finally ready to move forward. Final thought. Reclaiming your life, your peace, your success. It's possible, no matter what anyone has said about you. You are the one who gets to define your worth. I hope my story helped you see that. If you've walked away to protect yourself or rebuilt your life from the ground up, share your story with me. You're not alone. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Subscribe for more stories about reclaiming your life and standing your ground.